This episode of the Managing Madrid Podcast is brought to you by Intercontinental San Francisco Hotel. They were proud sponsors of our podcast, and they hosted our stay and our podcast, the actual podcast itself in San Francisco. And we were so thrilled to welcome so many listeners in the Bay Area who came out to our podcast. It was lovely meeting you all. Thank you for coming out. And quick shout out to Intercontinental again, because it's really an awesome location. If you're traveling to the Bay Area, stay with them. It was really convenient. I walked to the stadium before and after the game, right from the hotel. We could also walk to the pier, all these cool hipster coffee shops around the area. There's just so much to do around that hotel, and it was a really lovely place. And thank you to Intercontinental for hosting us once again. And coming up is a podcast, finally, for free. It's been a while. I know you guys haven't seen us for a while, unless you're on patreon.com/Managing Madrid. We took it a little bit light on content lately because after preseason, I just need to spend some time with my kids, and now the content will be revving up like crazy. So we did a podcast last night over patreon.com/Managing Madrid, and then today we got one. We got another one tomorrow over on Patreon. We got another one Friday lined up, and it's going to be nonstop basically from now until June, at the very least. Like relentless, psychotic. It's going to be insane. We got so much planned for you guys this coming season, but we'll also be active throughout the summer. I believe, I know, Super Cup post-game show live on Zoom for patrons exclusively. So if you want access to the Super Cup post-game show, not only access to it, but also live on the Zoom call with us, plus asking us questions at the end, plus interacting with the other Madridistas in the chat box, that's over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid as well. So coming up is a podcast that's recorded by myself and Euan McTear. We go over preseason takeaways. We came up with 4 or 5 really by the end of it, even though initially we only had 3. So enjoy it. And as always, we're going to get started here with the voices of Ray Hudson and Derek Ray. Let's go.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Welcome to a Wednesday edition of the Managing Madrid Podcast. Kiyan Sobhani is here, and he's joined by Euan McTear. It's been a while since we've had Euan on, and quite frankly, it's been a while since we've had anyone on. We've been a little bit low on content lately. And I thought on a sunny Wednesday in Madrid, and also here in Canada, just nationwide, probably sunny, we could talk about preseason. I know it's kind of weird to talk about preseason after so much time seems to have passed from our last game against Juve, but we've been actually a little bit low on content, so I don't know if we put out to the full extent what we could have in terms of preseason thoughts and what we've gathered from it, what's meaningful, what is not meaningful. So Euan is here, and I thought we could start with just going through and taking away 3 takeaways from preseason, which we have not addressed yet. And we're going to get started on that. But first of all, Euan, welcome back. How are you holding up in Madrid?
Yeah, good. Not much has changed here. Yeah, I think last time I spoke to you was just before the tour. You were planning to pack your bags and head off. I've just been here. I was actually in Scotland for a few days and spent some time at home there. So I watched actually one of the games in the middle of the night in Scotland, which I think not many people were doing. But no, back now in Madrid, and I came back. Nothing's changed. It's sunny as ever, and August in Madrid is always pretty ghost towny. No one is here. Everyone flees to the coast.
Well, it's funny because you did the post-game quotes for those games. You covered those, and we have two members of our post-game team in Europe. You and Sam Sharp, who is in England, and the time difference was crazy for you guys. And we have a few people on the West Coast or just in North America that the time is manageable, right? And in a weird way, I'm just not surprised at all that you were awake to cover the post-game quotes for those games. You had them up.
I mean, it's only 3 games. It's only 3 games. It's about fair that you guys that are in North America and are sometimes getting up late, or it's in the middle of your Sunday afternoon, all these games, For us, it's the time. No, it's 9 p.m. was every Real Madrid kickoff Spanish time last season. It felt like pretty much every game. So for us, it was normal time. So it's only fair we had to work with 3 games where it's at an awkward time, and 2 of them were Saturday nights into Sunday mornings. And to be honest, at that time on the Saturday morning, I'm going to be up anyway. The Wednesday morning one was more a case of go to bed and then get up early for it. But only 3 games, and now we're back to normal times.
That's
for
true.
Europe, anyway.
In Spain, you guys are just starting your day at that point. Although for you, I think you're just. I used to call you nocturnal. I think you're just 24 hours. You're just awake. I just feel like anytime I message you, you will answer. Yeah, I mean Sam didn't push it out like you did. Sam took the Clasico immediate reaction, and for the other 2, Club America, Juventus, he basically just ghosted me and just pretended he wasn't getting my messages. All right, so takeaways from preseason that we haven't discussed much yet. Matt and I tackled a few of them last night on the podcast, and we did some podcasts throughout our preseason tour. But I thought we could stick with 3 today. And you basically, I feel like, know these Ancelotti quotes like the back of your hand, maybe better than anyone, because you cover them regularly and you know what he's saying constantly. We could start with things that maybe you thought was interesting that he said, or if it's intertwined, that's fine too. But what was your first takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, to bring up those post-match quotes that I did either over breakfast or dinner, whatever you want to call it. I went back just before we came on just to see what headlines I picked for which game, trying to remember. And there was 3 that kind of stood out to me because they're kind of saying the same thing. One was, we won't sign anyone else, we're fine. One was, I don't want to break up the successful team of last season. And then he said, Casemiro, Kroos and Modric are the Bermuda Triangle, because the ball disappears there, which is just an all-time great Carlo quote. That's poetry. But his point is basically, yeah, these 3 guys still have it. And I guess the sort of common theme with those 3 post-match pressers is there's not going to be very much change, I think, or Ancelotti doesn't want all that much change. The one that he mentioned about, I don't want to break up the successful team of last season, was talking specifically about the UEFA Super Cup, because his plan is to, if everybody is fit, to name the same starting 11 from the Champions League final, partly because of loyalty. He said he wants to thank the players who made this game possible. Fair enough. But to me, that's a takeaway because, I mean, I think you need to renew. If you're standing still, you're going backwards. And I think if Ancelotti thinks, let's just run it back from what we had last season, let's not give more minutes to Camavinga, let's not give more minutes to Valverde, let's not introduce Tchouameni, Rudiger, I think that's a mistake. I think to keep it so similar to last season, which was obviously really successful, I think that might be an error.
I would probably agree with that too, also just in the fact that if you look at, based on last season, where the season basically turned was the pivotal point where he started to trust Camavinga and Rodrigo more. And I think, or even like the introduction of a very, very minute, subtle detail, but the introduction of Ceballos in those Champions League knockout games, that fresh burst of energy was really important too. And there were others, Lucas Vazquez too, but that was a good turning point in the season where I think he shifted the rotation pattern a little bit. So it's hard to know like what to take literally from those press conferences and those quotes and what to take more like metaphorically or whatever, however you want to word it, because I would imagine that he himself will change his opinion throughout the season based on what he sees, based on what's needed. We saw it with the press last season. We saw it with the lineups last season. You know, he'll reintroduce certain things, I think, and elements or players throughout the season, and he'll kind of adjust as he goes. But one thing I did kind of interpret from that was more so than the lineup itself, because as we know and as you said, he's going to go into the Super Cup with the same 11 in the Champions League final. He also did a test run of that for the Juve game. That's maybe how he'll start. And I think the other players can be incorporated as they go. I really feel like Tchouameni will probably be working his way into a starting role or playing himself into heavy minutes. And Camavinga is basically in that same mold that Ancelotti saw what he has up close in the Champions League run, and he'll be introduced more. But I kind of gathered it more as we're not going to make big changes to the squad necessarily. Everyone is crying out for this young striker from this league who scored like 5 goals last season, who we absolutely need for some reason, or maybe the bigger profiles or whatnot, or this right wing or that right wing. And I think the club stance is like, and I agree with this, generally speaking, from a squad construction standpoint. I've always kind of been on more of the pragmatic side of squad building, because I believe generally players can take leaps and they can almost act like these new signings. And I also believe that sometimes continuity is a safer path rather than blowing it up, unless, of course, your team actually needs wholesale changes, and that, of course, is a different story. But obviously, Real Madrid, the team that just won the double, doesn't need that necessarily. So I kind of took away from, like, the squad itself, Euan, is probably not going to be vastly different. And if it is, it's just going to be different and not vastly. Like, if we have a last-minute deal where Asensio leaves, someone else comes in, or we end up getting rid of Mariano as well and someone else comes in, it's probably going to be something minute as well, because we still, I don't think we're going to have something that's going to move the needle too much. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right with the squad. There is this talk, but I think it's also just a lot of it is just talk of potential backup striker. At the end of the day, even if there is one, it won't make too much of a difference, really. I think the squad is kind of set, but maybe if Asensio leaves, or maybe sign somebody, but I think the squad is quite set. My thing is more with the starting 11. I feel like some players who were coming off the bench last season and making a huge impact have maybe done enough to consider themselves starters this season. Camavinga being one example. I think this season Camavinga probably should expect to start, and maybe it's time for someone like that to start, not just come off the bench. So that's my thing when he says, keeping things the same. Let's just run it back. It's loyal. It kind of makes sense, but at the same time, I think you do need to always be evolving, especially when Barcelona have improved so much. It's Real Madrid won the league last season with 86 points. The couple of seasons before that as well, where 86 or 85 points was the points total that won the league. I think Real Madrid will get to 86 points again. But do Barcelona get more than 86? That's the thing. So maybe with Barcelona having upped their game so much, and we spoke about this on a previous podcast, it's not a need to absolutely panic. Barcelona were coming from a way back. Real Madrid had a huge head start. But I'm not saying they need to go and improve their squad, but I do think they need to evolve in some way, because if Barcelona are going to be better, maybe 86 points isn't enough. And when you look at Ancelotti's record, it's so weird, because he's the only coach that won each of the big 5 leagues. Nobody ever did that. But he only won each of those 5 leagues once. So Ancelotti in his whole career, incredible coaching career, really successful. He's won 5 leagues. Just so happens to be, like a sort of taste or sample set of like one of each kind. But he's only won 5 leagues, which means he's never repeated. He's the coach that every now and then will be good enough, because he's at great clubs as well, will win a league. But I think if you're to win 2 leagues in a row, which Real Madrid haven't done since 2007, 2008, was the last time Real Madrid won back-to-back league titles. I think you can't just expect to do the same again. I think you do need to make some sort of evolution, and I think it doesn't have to be with the squad necessarily. It just maybe has to be something new and fresh in the lineup. And from his quotes, I don't know if we're going to see that, at least not at the start. Your 3 points on offer in match day 1, 2, 3. With the league, they're just as important as the ones available in spring. It's not like the Champions League. So if it takes time to figure out, that might be some crucial points dropped.
That's a great point. And I definitely do think that the league will be more challenging this season. I personally don't feel that 86 points will be enough next season, although we'll see how it goes. Really depends on the health of Barcelona's new signings and how they'll mesh. I think if they stay healthy, there's no doubt Barcelona will be challenging for the title probably to the last match day. But if Real Madrid get complaints, it could be over before that. So Ancelotti's league record is a decent point to bring up. Real Madrid's league record throughout modern history as well is just a decent point to bring up. I mean, so much talent, so many Champions League titles, but the ratio to that, to the amount of league titles they win, is it should be higher on the domestic front. I do think that's a valid point to bring up. I think this will require a very driven effort from day one. I do think with regards to rotation, it's very hard for me to see Rudiger not just be a starter next season, given his profile, given who he is, his hunger, and also, quite frankly, from a tactical fit, I actually think he fits better than Militao does. But that's something we'll see. Watch this, by the way, Euan. This entire discussion of rotations Real Madrid's starting lineup will just run through Frankfurt in the Super Cup, and everyone will be like, "This is why he can't rotate." But I mean, there's no doubt Camavinga, Tchouaméni, Rudiger, all these guys have important places, and they need to. I mean, quite frankly, Modric, to have his superhuman performances, he needs to rest in between. He needs to. We got that World Cup. We got that Club World Cup. Certainly, I think the second half of the season is going to be really important too, as is the first half. But the second half, like, I'm kind of worried about that post-World Cup syndrome that
remember Modric. Yeah, remember Modric in 2018 after the World Cup.
Yeah.
That's going to be, like you say, second half of the season, and he's 4 years older, 4.5 years older than whatever happened to him after the last World Cup.
But possibly 4 years younger, knowing him. I don't know. But like, also, the other thing is, it wasn't just Modric. I mean, Modric felt it the most because he went to the final and playing extra time. But Kroos had it, even though he exited early. Varane had it that year. So it was just kind of like across the board. Everyone's powers got zapped, apart from Benzema, who obviously did not even play the World Cup. So we'll see how that second half
this time
goes.
Of course he will. Yeah,
that's right. So that's takeaway number one. Am I doing the next two takeaways, or do you have them lined up?
I think you go for the next one, because you just mentioned Rudiger, and this kind of comes into it.
Yeah, so Rudiger playing left back in that first game against Barcelona, everyone was confused, and when I was watching it, my takeaway was like, okay, this must be because Ancelotti wants Rudiger to defend Rafinha one-on-one, and to be fair, anytime that happened, that those two crossed paths, Rudiger had the best of those duels. And he's an amazing 1v1 defender. So I was like, maybe that's why. And Alaba, him, and will interchange. And then, but then it seemed like Ancelotti clarified that and was like, we'll basically never see that again. He never came out right and said that, but he said Ferland Mendy is the starting left back and all that stuff. And there was so much discussion around multiple different publications and different reports that Alaba is going to be the full-time left back this season. Maybe Ancelotti doesn't value Mendy that much, but he clarified that post-game that Mendy will be the starting left back. So maybe thoughts on that, and maybe the weird confusion, and also Rudiger playing left back that day inexplicably. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the way Ancelotti explained it was something they tried in training and they liked it and they decided to go for it. But I think he must have known it would, for it to be in the first preseason game. So in other words, Rudiger's unofficial debut, was just a little bit weird. And I think a lot of people took that as if he was trying to make a point. I don't think he was. I think it was just something they wanted to experiment with. But certainly weird. And I think that's why he then came out and clarified that Mendy is going to remain the starting left back. And then he explained we basically have two backups and no backups, which was there's no Marcelo and it doesn't seem like he's being replaced. But the backup left back now is, the way Ancelotti put it, Rudiger if we want a more defensive one, and Alaba if we want a left back who can also go forward a bit. That's great, but that also then means you have less depth at centre back. But yeah, I guess in terms of the numbers in the defence, it's the same. You've swapped Marcelo for Rudiger, but I think of course he's going to play left back, and it all just kind of all these parts move around. What was interesting to me was even Rudiger playing. Once he moved to centre-back, he played a little bit of left centre-back, a little bit of right centre-back. And I wonder if he is just going to sort of be the Swiss Army knife kind of player that is just fitting in, starting most games, but not necessarily always in the same position, the kind of player that just plays all the time, but always is kind of fitting in. A little bit like Araujo in Barcelona. Like, you look at who started the most games, it's usually him. But then you look at where he was playing, and he was always kind of someone's backup, doing both things at once, really.
So as you were saying all that, I was taking mental notes and also just coming up with new takeaways, so that maybe this list will be 5 takeaways or 6 takeaways. I don't know, but
okay.
But we can make them quick. So don't worry, Euan, you'll get back to what is it? What time? It must be supper time soon, or breakfast. Knowing
half past 7. Nah, we just had lunch in Madrid. Come on,
fair enough.
So it's just after lunch.
The Araujo thing, it was interesting that Araujo played right back and Christensen played right center back, and it was almost like a mirrored version of Real Madrid on their end, because Christensen, instead of playing full back, and Araujo, instead of playing center back, they switched roles just like Rudiger and Alaba did. And I found myself after that game, quite frankly, I made a journalistic mistake, because I went to the wrong press conference. I went to Xavi's press conference while Ancelotti was in the mix zone outside. So, and I didn't know that until after I made that mistake. And long story short, I found myself in Xavi's press conference and asked him a question about Araujo, and he was just waxing lyrical about how great Araujo was as a right back, his development, and also just the way he's defended Vinicius, not only in that game but also in the Bernabeu, in the Clasico, in the 4-0, the one we don't like speaking about. And so, and that was an interesting thing. And I wonder, like, so my takeaway to make this more Real Madrid related was that Vinicius versus Araujo in just future Clásicos. It's one that's been challenging for him, for Vinicius. He's one of the better defenders he's faced, that Vinicius has faced. You know, ironically, he destroyed Christensen in Chelsea, the guy who they hid on as the right center back that in the Clásico. But Araujo has been just a really, now, quite frankly, Araujo's a beast. You know, I have no problem saying that. I've said it the first time I saw him, and especially after that Clásico. He'll have, there's always going to be one or two moments that Vinicius will get the best of him. But Araujo, generally, just as a player, like, he's such a good defender. He's a physical freak. He's an imposing figure. And Rudiger versus Araujo is also going to be a tasty thing for the next few years or whatever. But Vinicius versus Araujo, I think that's something he needs to maybe figure out for himself. And there are times where Vinicius maybe just plays into his own head sometimes because he's trying to force some things and force just and not let the game naturally come to him and flow it more effortlessly. And in some games and against some defenders that flows more naturally. So he's going to need to figure out that Araujo duel moving forward. And the other one I wanted to shoehorn in, and I'm just going to throw these two extra items at you, and you can just take them wherever you want. But we've spoken so much this preseason about Rudiger and Alaba and Militao and Mendy. There's two figures, one in particular that I think we've never discussed, and that is, one is Jesus Vallejo, continues to look good in his cameos.
Giving assists now.
Just like popping up and showing his versatility. On one sequence, he's Pirlo. On another sequence, he's Beckenbauer. So he's looked good again, and this continues the trend of his performances last season towards the end of the season, where he was all of a sudden appearing because Real Madrid had won the league title. So I'm happy for him. I don't know what that means necessarily, but if it doesn't look like he's being sold as of now. And the other one is, I was just rewatching some stuff, and Nacho has looked good too in preseason. So the insurance and depth we have at center back right now is pretty amazing, but I just don't know how deep we'll actually go to use Vallejo. Maybe if we have a lot of fullback issues and injuries to Mendy, Carvajal, Nacho will fill in on both sides, which will free up some space. But what were your thoughts on that?
No, just to take that exact line you just said there, like the assurance and depth we have at centre back is like, what did you say? Just amazing. Imagine you said that this time last year when Real Madrid had just lost Ramos and Varane in the same summer, and everybody was freaking out about centre back. The rest of the squad, I think everyone knew it was quite good. Maybe a bit aging, but good. But to lose Ramos and Varane in one summer, everybody was freaking out. And now, just like you say, maybe there's not any particular defender who's reaching the heights of either Ramos or Varane when they were at their peak, but everybody in that centre-back unit is a 7 or 8 out of 10 pretty much every game. So the depth you have there, the number of players you have there, the options basically, the versatility as well, the fact some of them can play full-back, they can switch from right to left, no problems. The different kinds of profiles, if you have a different sort of challenge, you can go for, Nacho or Militao or Alaba, depending on what kind of challenges opposition might throw up. I think Real Madrid has been able to solidify the centre-back position in the space of 12 months from when everybody was panicking. That's quite impressive. And it didn't take all that much work, just a couple of free agents, bring on Vallejo, manage to keep Nacho, and Militao to keep developing. It's impressive stuff.
It's definitely good depth to have, and it's amazing. We're so thin at certain positions like striker and right back, but then in other positions we're just so deep. And I would argue almost like the spine of the team, the defense and midfield. It's good to have that security there at least, if nothing else. We have one more takeaway, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it's just the lack of Castilla players on the tour. A little bit surprising because this is normally the time of year when you look at those players, especially when it's a coach who's in not just his first season. A new coach comes in, and that happens often at big clubs like Real Madrid, and they just want to work out, see who's good, who's not out of the first team squad that they don't know much about. But when it's the second season, when you've got a long summer like this, a little bit surprising, I think, that we didn't see many Castilla players used by Ancelotti, because I think next season going forward, especially in such a busy year, especially after the World Cup, Castilla are going to keep playing their games during the World Cup, so they'll be fit and fresh when December, January, these games come around. A bit surprising, I think, that we didn't see even just a few players given a run out there to show what they can do.
Yeah, it's also weird because I remember part of the reason I always said I enjoyed preseason so much was because you kind of get to see these. It's kind of this nice environment for the Castilla players to get rare minutes, to go on these cool tours and get some experience. And, I remember in years past, like it was, I'm sure I'm not going to get an accurate list of players, but, in like 2019, I think it was that the 7-3 in Jersey versus Atletico. And whoever else we were playing at that time, I think we had a game in Florida as well, and wherever else, you'd have Odegaard coming in, you'd have a bunch of Castilla players coming in at halftime, and it was just like wholesale changes, Castilla players coming in at some point, like they would just dominate the field, and there was none of that this year. You had wholesale changes at halftime, but it was all A team or reserves or whatever. It wasn't anyone actually from deeper down in the Castilla levels, which, to be honest, it kind of makes sense to go that route. If the goal is to prepare for the season and to be match fit, is it really going to impact your season in a positive way if you give Latasa a couple minutes in preseason? Probably not. So do you prioritize getting Hazard false 9 minutes and getting match fitness? I think that makes more sense, right? So it makes more sense to me that you would just do that every year, to be honest. So it was just interesting to see that actually go down like that. I have a theory. It's not my theory. I read it literally somewhere in the Spanish press, and I can't even remember who to give credit to. But I mentioned it to Matt, and he thought it made sense. What do you think?
Just own it. Just make it yours, unless you disagree with
it. If it's not true, then I don't want to own it. But if it is, I'll take credit. The reason that Mayoral didn't play was because Ancelotti didn't want to risk him getting injured and then decreasing his value before a sale. What do you think of that theory?
I think part of the reason he didn't play was he was the one who arrived late because he had problems with his vaccination status and getting into the US. So that was why he... there was I think it was 29 players in total that went on tour. But only 28 flew out originally because he had to join up with the team. I don't know how late, maybe 2 or 3 days, like same kind of thing as Xavi, but different kind of reasons. I think 2 or 3 days after everyone else had arrived, Mayoral flew out on his own, which I guess is a long, lonely flight. And then basically, I think long, lonely flight back to Tafe. But I think part of the reason was he wasn't there from day one. I think he wasn't there from day one of camp, so I think that's part of why he maybe didn't get minutes. But that's not as interesting or exciting or controversial or juicy or spicy as your take. So let's go with that.
Yeah, I don't know, no one's even. I felt bad for the guy on multiple levels when the sale happened. One is because I thought, he wanted to stay. He's had a lot of bad luck and timing in his career. When I've already said this a million times, but I'll just make it quick. Like when Zidane wanted to keep him over Jovic, but then he went to Roma. He did great at Roma first season, but then Mourinho came and Mourinho just cast him aside. And then Zidane was gone by the time, he could potentially have come back. And then I didn't even know about this whole solo flight thing days later. And then he has to come back by himself. And then I also felt bad on another level because it's just no one really cared to talk about him 2 days ago when he was sold. No one really cared at all. I cared. I wrote an article. I cared. I wrote an article about him.
You cared.
Yeah,
you had the theory and everything. You were ready to spice up and make Mayoral interesting, and then I just shoot it down with nope. It was bureaucracy.
I always.
But no, I think it's cool. What do you think of him going to? What do you think of him going to Tafe? What are you happy for him? Are you sad for him? You sound like a a bit pessimistic about his next few years. His 5-year
No,
contract.
I'm not pessimistic about him. I just kind of felt bad for him. But I think, like, to me, like, if he had stayed, it probably wouldn't have been necessarily the best career move anyway. But he had a really good season at Getafe. And, like, statistically speaking,
I went to games. He was, Enes Unal had the season of his life, but when Mayoral came in halfway through, that really was what changed a lot of things for Getafe, and they ultimately stayed up. And it was better than Sandro, which isn't saying much, but no, when he came in Getafe, you think, right, they need to try and keep him for next season. 10 million is a lot for Getafe to spend, but the fact they were willing to do that obviously shows how much they knew how important he was for them.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's interesting if you look at the numbers. Statistically speaking, he was literally, I think, the top 3 in all of Europe in terms of efficiency as a striker, and that just means like goals per shot, per shots on target or something like that. And
I think per minute as well was quite high, because when he arrived at Getafe, he was coming off the bench a lot.
Yeah.
So I think his goals per minute as well was way up there. Yeah.
And also impressive because he wasn't even getting that many touches. Like at Roma, they would actually play him as a link-up striker. They had more of the ball. Getafe didn't play that way. So you'd watch...
Yeah, they don't.
You'd watch
they
Getafe
don't do the
games.
link-up.
Yeah, they don't do link-up. You watch Getafe games, and like over the course of 90 minutes, you just don't really... I was trying to take notes on Mayoral, but he barely touched it, but then he would score. And so I thought he was really efficient and did well. So I think it's safe to assume I think it's a good option for him to stay there. Although I would have... there's an alternate timeline for him if Fonseca doesn't leave Roma and he just maybe has another season where he's just like at a club like that. So I don't know. Timing was never on his side, to be honest. So That's true. Is what it is. Any new preseason takeaways from that discussion, or do we close it here?
I don't think I have any. I don't know how many we came up with in the end, but at least 3. We got to 3 full ones and a few others. I think that makes it up to.
I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it 4 in the podcast headline. 4 takeaways from preseason. I think that's safe, and I think 3
3.75.
Yeah, I think we can lump the Araujo and Vallejo thing into one category. That'll be the 4. Yeah. All right. Well, this was very impressive. This was the slowest day of the year news-wise, and I did not know what we were going to record.
It's all about to start. This 1 week until the first official game. It's all about to ramp up, and then here we go.
Little do listeners know when they're like, oh, wow, 4 takeaways from preseason. They have no idea that literally until we hit record, we didn't know what we were talking about. So I'm proud of us.
No, we didn't. Now you've given away the secret.
Yeah, but I just want listeners to even be more impressed that we did this with zero preparation. So,
I see.
Euan, I'll talk to you off air. We'll get you on next week for another unplanned podcast last minute, and we'll put something out there. Thanks for your time, man. Appreciate you. Take care.
Sounds good.
All right, before we wrap it up and send you guys along on your way, we wanted to give a quick shout out to our patrons over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid. Not only do patrons get exclusive access to episodes, but you can also be a guaranteed patron, which means you not only get guaranteed responses to your questions, but you also get a specific shout out on the podcast. So shout out to these $10 plus patrons who do so much to support the show. We got Brandon Alvarez, Willie Reed, Wei Pering, Wamik Jamal, Umar Mahadi, Tyler Simon, Tobias Arroyo Botcher, Tarek Goktas, Talib Salhab, Tahmid Kalam, Sujai Wani, Sumanshu Singh, Shivam Tiwari, Sherry Soriol, Sheikh Atiri, Shamil, Shabazz Sharapov, Sergio Arispe, Santos Solorzano, Samuli Justin, Samir Z, Said Mahad, Sai Mohan Sasi Kumar, Rodrigo Balmaceda, Rishi D, Phoenix, Peter Powell, Paulo Fierro, Patrick Odai Fadi, Oscar Barrera, Nico Laxo, Nicholas Zapatero Zubiare. Scroll, page 2. Nicholas Molo, Nick Ribeiro, Nelson Mazariego, Muxi Thengal, Mowgli, MJ Diego, Michael Zinberg, Marin Myrtle, Matthew Atkins, Martin Ridman, Logan Stahl, Leon Savernakis, Kunal Tilakar, Crystal Glass, Kevin Rivera, Jose Cruz, John Fernandez, Jeff Thurston, Jason Fitz, Ian Marley, Graham Gerard, Gary Kohut, Frederick Antakiro, Frederick Sundros, Faisal Hamdan, S.A. Davisito, Eloy Enriquez, Edward Sossman, Daniel Williams, Christian Toft, Christian Acosta, Charles Williams, Brendan Powers, Brandon Stevens, Ashik Bashar, Armin Gashi, Armando L, Anton Rudenko, Anirudh Singh, Alexis Ceniceros, Al Azaz Hussein, Adrian Rios, Adar Zalukovic, Adam Dorsey, and Bella Chow, and Barun, and Ramtin Makrur, Fabian Moreno, and Daniel Smith. Love you guys so much. Appreciate you all, and Hala Mari.